Hi everyone, I'm Andy, and this is the AI Breakdown. Welcome to your weekly news edition, where I'll cover what happened in AI last week and why it matters. Coming up this week, GPT 5.6 finally opens up to everyone, and it brings an agent called ChatGPT Work along with it. Apple takes OpenAI to court over its hardware secrets. Meta looks set to start selling its spare AI compute. The UK puts the four big clouds under financial supervision. An AI agent runs a ransomware job largely on its own. EU AI Act enforcement lands in 3 weeks. And Anthropic's Cowork agent goes mobile and more. 2 weeks back, I covered OpenAI launching GPT 5.6 behind a government gate. About 20 vetted organizations got access, and nobody else did. Last week, it was still locked. On Thursday the 9th, it opened up. The GPT 5.6 family is now publicly available, although access depends on your plan. Terra reaches free users, while the full Sol, Terra, and Luna lineup is available on paid plans and through the API. And the names are worth learning because OpenAI says they're sticking around. Sol is the flagship, Terra is the mid-range option, and Luna is the fast, cheap one. The pitch this time is cost, and I take that seriously. Artificial Analysis's Independent Coding Agent Index puts Sol at the top, 2.8 points ahead of Anthropic's Fable 5. OpenAI says those runs used less than half the output tokens, took less than half the time, and cost about a third less. Sam Altman separately told CNBC that Sol is 54% more token efficient on agentic coding, although the comparison behind that figure wasn't clearly specified. Treat OpenAI's efficiency comparisons as vendor claims, even though the underlying artificial analysis ranking is independent. But the broader shift looks real. The labs are starting to compete not just on raw intelligence, but on the cost of completing a useful task. That matters as demand for inference grows and access to compute becomes an increasingly important constraint. Which brings me to the other launch on the same day, ChatGPT Work. It's an agent. You hand it a goal, it gathers context from your connected apps and files, and it works at the task for hours if it needs to. It comes back with finished documents, spreadsheets, decks, even small web apps. It starts with Pro, Enterprise, and Education plans, with Plus and Business following over the next few days. And the Codex coding app is becoming the new ChatGPT desktop app, with Chat, Work, and Codex on every plan, including free. The Atlas browser is being wound down as part of the same shuffle. Now, the gate. The White House had asked OpenAI on a nominally voluntary basis to keep the June launch to government-vetted partners, citing Sol's cyber capability. 12 days later, after extra testing by the Commerce Department's AI Standards Center, it went public. The White House was careful to say it gave no green light or approval. OpenAI says it doesn't believe this kind of process should become the long-term default, and by the 1st of August, the formal voluntary framework for frontier releases is due, the one I covered last week, so this was the dress rehearsal, and on the surface it worked. I'll say what I said when Fable 5 went dark though. Checks at the frontier are sensible in principle. OpenAI's preview gate lasted 12 days. Anthropic's product was switched off worldwide for 19, and I still can't square those two. One caveat before anyone replatforms. Meta, an independent evaluation group, found that Sol's detected cheating rate was higher than that of any public model it had tested on its React agent harness. It caught the model exploiting flaws in the evaluation environment and trying to uncover hidden tests. Meta cautions that the rate can be influenced by the test setup, but it was high enough to make its capability estimate unreliable. This episode is sponsored by Notify Technology, a health and safety software partner, helping teams run incident management, audits and inspections, and risk assessments in one place. And with Notify Spark, the AI companion, they're streamlining incident reporting and investigations, saving time, reducing admin load, and helping teams act faster on what matters. Learn more at notifytechnology.com. Next, the courtroom. On Friday, Apple sued OpenAI in federal court in California. The claim is trade secret theft and breach of contract, and Apple didn't stop at the company. It also named I/O Products, the hardware startup OpenAI bought for over $6 billion, and two individuals, Tang Tan, OpenAI's hardware chief, and a former Apple vice president, and an engineer called Chang Liu. The allegations are specific. Apple says Tan directed candidates interviewing at OpenAI to bring actual parts, batteries and logic boards in for show and tell sessions. It says Tan retained or obtained an internal Apple document marked Need to Know, which described Apple's offboarding procedures, and that OpenAI shared it with recruits before they handed in their notice, giving them advance warning of Apple's security checks. And it says Liu kept an Apple laptop, found an authentication bug that let him back into Apple's network storage after he'd already joined OpenAI, and downloaded dozens of confidential files about unreleased products. The complaint quotes a text he allegedly sent, LOL, I found out I can access the network storage, so funny. Apple says it raised its concerns with OpenAI in February and got no response. It wants an injunction, its materials back, and damages. These are allegations, and OpenAI's response was blunt. We have no interest in other companies' trade secrets. Nothing is proven, and cases like this often settle long before courtroom. The backdrop is what makes it bigger than one lawsuit. Apple says that more than 400 former Apple employees now work at OpenAI, which said it planned to unveil its first hardware product in the second half of this year, ahead of a release in 2027. Bloomberg reports that OpenAI still believes it can announce the product this year and release it in 2027, although that timetable could change as the company works through Apple's allegations. Meanwhile, the two companies are still partners. ChatGPT sits inside Apple Intelligence today, and neither side has announced any change there. And remember, Apple's own AFM3 models, unveiled at WWDC last month, were built in collaboration with Google, so Apple will partner deeply on AI when the terms suit it. Moving talent is legal, and in AI right now it's constant. Files, parts, and access are a different matter, and discovery could force OpenAI to disclose far more of its internal communications to Apple, some of which may eventually become public if they are filed with the court or used at trial. Right, from the courtroom to the balance sheet, Meta had the kind of week that moves markets, driven by a product launch, a leaked infrastructure memo, and reports of a much bigger cloud strategy. On the 9th, Reuters published details of an internal memo. The plan it describes is enormous, reaching 7 gigawatts of total compute capacity this year, then doubling that to 14 gigawatts in 2027. Its own chip, called Iris, designed with Broadcom and manufactured by TSMC, goes into production in September. There are multi-year supply deals with Samsung for memory, SanDisk for storage, and Sumitomo Electric for fiber. Spending on AI infrastructure could reach $145 billion this year, the top of Meta's guidance. Meta declined to comment on the memo, so treat the detail with square brackets for now. The bigger move sits behind it. Bloomberg reported at the start of the month that Meta is building a cloud business internally called Meta Compute to sell its surplus capacity. Apparently, Meta is considering both raw compute rental and a managed service giving developers access to hosted models including MuseSpark. Separately, the Meta Model API launched last week uses an OpenAI-compatible interface. That compatibility matters because it substantially reduces the engineering friction involved in testing or adopting Meta's models. Meta has confirmed Meta Compute as its internal infrastructure organization, but it has not confirmed Bloomberg's report that it will become an external cloud provider. Zuckerberg said in May that such a business was definitely on the table. Markets didn't wait. On Friday, the shares hit a record high around $670 after Bank of America roughly halved its estimate of what Meta pays per gigawatt of compute to about $22 billion based on that memo and with an if accurate attached. Benchmark looked at the same memo and stayed at hold, and the smaller AI clouds felt it. CoreWeave dropped around 14% when the original report landed, because a Meta that rents out its own capacity is a Meta that needs less of theirs. My read on this market hasn't changed. The demand is real and the infrastructure need is real. But a record close, built on a leaked memo, and one bank's revised spreadsheet is the market pricing certainty that nobody has yet. If Meta Compute is real, we'll hear from Meta at earnings, with prices and customers attached. Now, some regulation closer to home. On Friday, the Treasury designated the European entities through which Amazon Web Services, Microsoft and Google Cloud serve the UK, along with Oracle's UK business, as critical third parties to the financial system, and from Monday this week, the Bank of England, the PRA, and the FCA formally oversee them. It's the first use of powers Parliament created in the Financial Services and Markets Act back in 2023. The logic is concentration. A 2024 bank and FCA survey found that the top 3 cloud providers accounted for 73% of all cloud providers named by financial firms. Nikhil Rathi at the FCA put it plainly, when the same providers serve thousands of firms, a single failure can reverberate across the financial system. So, the rulebook regulators wrote in 2024 now applies to those 4 companies directly: resilience self-assessments, scenario testing, and a duty to keep regulators and the financial firms relying on them informed during major incidents. The scope is narrower than some of the headlines suggest. This covers the services those clouds supply to the financial sector and nothing else they do. Designation is oversight rather than a license, and the 4 providers all put out supportive statements. It's also a rolling regime, so more names can be added over time. Why am I giving this a full segment on an AI show? Because these 4 companies provide much of the cloud infrastructure and a growing share of the AI services used by UK financial firms. Many co-pilots and externally hosted models used by banks and insurers depend on infrastructure that, until Monday, was not itself directly overseen by a UK financial regulator. And if Meta becomes a significant cloud provider to UK financial firms, there is now a regime here capable of bringing it under direct oversight. Different corner now, security. Back at the start of June, I covered Sysdig catching an AI agent running a live intrusion, adapting as it went. The follow-up has arrived and it goes further. Sysdig has published its analysis of an operation it calls Jade Puffer, which it assesses to be the first documented case of agentic ransomware. An AI agent ran the job end-to-end, reconnaissance, stealing credentials, moving through the network, setting up persistence, and finally encrypting data and leaving a ransom note. A person still stood the operation up and picked the target, so keep the word autonomous on a leash. Once it was pointed though, the agent did the work. The details tell you what's changed. It gained its initial foothold through a known, fixable vulnerability in an internet-facing Langflow instance, then used that machine to attack a separate production server. The Langflow flaw dated from 2025 and had already been patched. This victim hadn't applied it. At one point, the agent went from a failed login to a working fix of its own in 31 seconds. It executed more than 600 distinct payloads, many filled with the chatty, self-narrating comments associated with LLM-generated code. It encrypted more than 1,300 configuration records and deleted the originals. And then came the farce. The agent never actually saved the encryption key, so paying the ransom recovers nothing, and the ransom note claims stronger encryption than it actually used. The Bitcoin address was the canonical example used across Bitcoin developer documentation. So, Sysdig could not tell whether the model had reproduced it from its training data or if the operator had supplied it deliberately. That's the story. The tradecraft is old, the economics are new. Scanning the internet for every known unpatched flaw and then working each victim used to cost a crew hours per target. An agent makes it close to free, at machine speed, around the clock. The defense list is the same one your security lead already has. Patch what faces the internet, don't expose your admin and config systems, and control what leaves the network. Staying with regulation for one more. On the 2nd of August, the Commission's 1-year grace period for enforcing the EU AI Act's general purpose AI rules ends. The obligations have applied since last August. This is when the Commission gets its full enforcement and fining powers. From that day, the Commission can demand technical documentation from model providers, run its own evaluations with access to the models themselves, order risk mitigation, and in the extreme case, order a model restricted or withdrawn from the EU market. Fines run up to 3% of global turnover or 15 million euros, whichever is higher. But look at who those powers apply to. They cover the companies that build general-purpose models and place them on the EU market. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Mistral, and the rest. For a business that uses AI rather than builds it, the day is much smaller. The heavy high-risk obligations have been delayed, until December 2027 for standalone systems such as recruitment or education tools, and August 2028 for AI embedded in regulated products. What is start on the 2nd of August for some ordinary firms is the transparency layer. Providers of customer-facing AI must make clear when people are interacting with AI, while businesses deploying emotion recognition, deepfakes, or certain AI-generated public interest content must disclose that use. The rules reach model providers wherever they're based, so the big American labs are squarely in scope for their EU business, and the AI office doing the enforcing is widely reported to be under-resourced for the job, so expect enforcement to start slowly. My advice stands from June. Work out whether you are a provider or a deployer, and identify whether any of your uses fall into the high-risk or transparency categories. One more product story. Anthropic's Cowork, the desktop agent I first covered when it appeared in January, went to web and mobile last week Tuesday. Sessions now run in Anthropic's cloud rather than on your machine, so a scheduled task runs with your laptop shut and approvals come to your phone. It's rolling out to Mac subscribers first, with other plans to follow over the coming weeks, and usage limits are doubled until the 5th of August while people try it. One number in the announcement stopped me. Anthropic analysed 1.2 million Cowork sessions across more than 600,000 organisations, and over 90% of the work wasn't software development. A third of it was business process work. About a sixth was content and copywriting. Coding was under 1 session in 10. It's Anthropic's own data about Anthropic's own product, so seasoned to taste. But it does suggest that Cowork is being used more for operational and communications work than for writing software. Whoever inside the organisation is doing that work. 2 quick ones before we wrap. Google's Gemini 3.5 Pro is reportedly landing this Friday, the 17th, after what's described as a complete architectural rebuild with a 2 million token context window. Every one of those details, including the date, comes from leaks. As of yesterday, there was no model card, no pricing, and no API listing, and Google isn't commenting. The delay is real. Believe the rest when Google publishes it. And Anthropic has extended free Fable 5 access for paid subscribers again, now through this Sunday the 19th, at up to half your weekly usage allowance. If you've already burned your included allowance and it doesn't reset before the deadline, the extension does nothing for you, which subscribers have noticed loudly. Alongside that, a model called Claude Honeycomb briefly appeared inside Cursor last week before vanishing. The community reckons it's Opus 5 in disguise. Anthropic has said nothing. So what ties the week together? Agents cross the line in both directions at once. ChatGPT Work will sit with a job for hours and hand you the finished article. Cowork's own numbers say the people leaning on agents hardest are running operations, and one agent out there ran a ransomware job from door to ransom note. The same week, the ground under all of it hardened. A frontier model reached the public through a Washington review. The 4 clouds that carry UK finance now answer to a financial regulator, and Brussels switches on enforcement in 3 weeks. AI is turning into infrastructure, and infrastructure comes with inspectors. That's all for this week's AI Roundup. If you found value in this breakdown, please leave a rating and hit subscribe. See you next week.